Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the Mashpee Men's Club on this beautiful Cape Cod fall day. We begin each of our meetings with a salute to the flag, and it's led by a veteran. Today, we're going to be honored with Al Toll leading us. So, Al, if you would lead us in the pledge, please.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you, Rouse. Okay, we're going to turn things over to Brad.
Good morning. Oh, that's a loud mic. Yes, my name is Brad Sweet, and I'm the guy that got stuck with putting together programs every month for you gentlemen and occasionally ladies to come and hear whatever we come up with. And so I'm first appeal to you to come up with some ideas of speakers, things we haven't talked about, and I'm interested in it. You just give me the ideas, and I'll do the legwork and maybe ask you for some contact information. You have it. And we'll track these people down and see whether we can find them and bring them in here to speak to you. So I'm open to any ideas. Anybody got any suggestion? Anybody that you see in the newspapers, on television or wherever that have some local orientation that we can bring in as a speaker? We've brought in many of the department heads within Mashpee, within the school systems and other places like that. We're open to anything, any ideas. And at this point, unless somebody else raises their hand, I'm stuck for a while. So please, give me some ideas. It's much easier if I get some ideas. It'd be much easier if you said, I'll get you a speaker. I will bring the speaker to you. Now, that would be a wonderful case. But, you know, anything, business people, you know, we have not had that I am aware of a business person in town who is maybe retired now and is pretty proud of what they have accomplished. This gentleman mentioned the library, things of that nature, that you saw this kind of activity going up. I mean, the developments that have been put up around here, you know, why don't we hear from the business people that either run them today or did run them or helped to develop them? So those are the kinds of ideas. Certainly any of the politicians in town within the county. We've tried to get some county people in here. That hasn't worked too well. We certainly are getting the town people to come in from time to time. And I think it's every once in a while we're able to grab one of our state reps and bring them in. So feel free to give me ideas or step up and say, I'll take care of it and I'll bring somebody in. So please, today, I'll switch gears to today. Today is a very special program that came about through Chris and I. As you probably are aware, Chris and I are Mashpee TV guys, and Chris and I were sitting around the studio one day, and he says to me, so what do you got lined up for speakers? And I said, I don't know, I'm running out of ideas. And he said, I got an idea for you. And I said, let's see whether we can develop it. So it took a while for us to put the pieces together, but the format is this, and we're going to transition a little bit now because we need to bring the speakers and get them in place, get them hooked up so that they will be heard clearly here. But most importantly, Chris will be hosting their performance, their offering this today, because we're going to record this entire thing. It'll be available on Mashpee TV forever until somebody decides it's time to come down. So this is going to be a program that'll run. It'll be an hour program on Mashpee TV. We're going to record it now, and therefore you see we have additional mics here. We have additional equipment in here. So this is local television in action, I guess the best way to put it. Chris does this kind of a program on Mashpee TV on a regular basis. He hosts this thing, you know, candidate nights and so forth. And excuse me. You ready? Okay, we've got the signal that we're ready to roll here. So this is our offering today. This is going to be the walk down memory lane of Mashpee Commons. It's not too often that you find an opportunity to bring two people in and discuss this kind of a situation. Two people that either have lived or worked in Mashpee Commons for over 50 years. Just stop and think about that. Many of you don't go back that far with Mashpee Commons. Others of you go back perhaps that long ago. And there's a number of stories that are going to come out of it. Chris Ball is the logical person to lead the discussion. I've been around Mashpee and New Seabury area for 20 plus years, but I'm an amateur. I'm a kid compared to other people who have lived their entire life here. And then you'll know the story about Mashpee Commons and some of the interesting things that happen. Chris Ball has deep roots in Mashpee Commons, and before that, the New Seabury Shopping Center, and you'll hear more about that as we go along. But he knows where the skeletons are buried. He's lived and created some of the stories you'll probably hear about today. So that's the reason why I asked Chris to be the host of today. And as we transition now to bring Chris up, Chris, why don't you come on up and get us set up for the discussion? Got to probably do some microphone work and bring our guests up. Bobby Byrne is coming up now. Bobby, we all know Bobby as Bobby Byrne, the pub owner on Central Square in Mashpee Commons. And Mary LeClaire, who you may not always know, but we now know Mary because she has a village named after her. And that's pretty important, okay? And so Mary has been involved in Mashpee Commons for a long, long time. She used to be the manager of the bank, and the bank is now buried inside of the Chinese restaurant. Okay, across from CVS, in there is Mary's old bank, okay? And so after many years of doing that kind of work, then Mary got into politics. And Mary got herself elected 3 times to be a county commissioner for the county of Barnstable. And since then, since she retired, she spends all of her time donating her knowledge, her capability in all kinds of organizations, whether they're charity, whether they're civic or whatever. She still is a library commissioner to this day. And Bobby, of course, has a long history without getting into all the details, because I'm sure there'll be an X-rated story in some of those stories, Bob. But in any case, he came here in the early 1970s and established his pub after having many experiences in pubs in Beverly Hills, in the east side of Manhattan, if I recall correctly. East side of Manhattan?
Where I worked?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so anyway, he's had experience with pubs, and that's why he has developed a great pub that has had lasting ability for over 50 years. This pub, as well as a Centerville version of the Bobby Byrne pub. So without further ado, Chris, you're on. Do your shtick.
Okay. You can shut that one off. What I was trying to get Brad to say before is, I'm the executive director of Mashpee TV. The guy that makes it all happen is in the back. I was trying to get some recognition for Justin. Everything we do, technical-wise, it's Justin. Normally, I'm here filming, or Mike's here filming. Justin's back and has taken us to a whole nother level. So a lot of the credit that we do now is because of what Justin does. So I was just looking to make sure he was recognized. Today he came and set up mics for us. So I'm Chris Ball from Mashpee TV, as I said. I have known Mary LeClaire and Bobby Byrne for over 55 years. A lot of the stories you won't hear because we could still go to jail for them. But it was as we all know, it was a whole different world back then, before everybody had a camera and everything, and things were different. And Mashpee was much, much different. Back then, it was the New Seabury Shopping Center, and there was the pub, a couple of the stores, the bank, etc. I bet both of Mary and Bobby around 55 years ago. Bobby, I knew from working at the New Seabury Country Club prior to him opening his first pub in Mashpee. He now has the pub in Mashpee. He has the lanes in Mashpee, Sandwich, Hyannis, somewhere else by me still?
No, the ones I had, I sold.
Okay. And I worked for Bobby for 12 years, so way back when. He hired me when I was 18, on my 18th birthday, and back then the drinking age was 18. Mashpee at that time had the only 2 o'clock drinking license on Cape Cod. Everybody else shut at 12 or 1 o'clock. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, or generally about 12 o'clock in the morning, when everybody else would be stocking up, or they would be taking down their supplies and getting ready to shut down, we would be stocking up because everybody from every other town showed up in Mashpee. And it was basically Bobby Burns. It was, in the summer, we had On the Rocks, which is, how do I describe it? Across the street from like where the Lanes is now, that sand pit that was all opened up and everything, that would hold up to 2,000 people back then. We had the farm that was now the paint store up on 151. That was the farm. So when we remember the new Seabury Shopping Center at that time, that then became Mashpee Commons and developed into, where you have world-class events, like we had the Mashpee Pops there for 20 years before they kept expanding and we couldn't do it anymore. You've got the race for Le Mans. You have entertainment and things going on constantly. And it certainly, it may not be the center of Mashpee, but it's where most of it happens, is in Mashpee Commons. So, there's a lot of history and everything there. I went to the archives yesterday. Brad, could you pass those out? I went to the Mashpee Archives, which is a great place to visit, yesterday, and I picked up some of these books. I've marked some of them with some of the things that'll be of Mashpee Commons and such that we'll talk about, but feel free to look through any part of them. There's a lot of history of Mashpee in there. That being said, I think that I will let Robert start speaking.
Don't call me Robert.
I'll call you whatever I want.
It's not alliterative. I'm Bobby Byrne. That's the name I'm using today. Initially, I want to honor the veterans. The veterans are so important in my life as I grew up in Taunton. And I didn't have a father, and the veterans were the kindest men I have ever met, because I was afraid of men, because I was little and they were big and they were strong. So I would see them at the YMCA every day because they belonged to a club called the 5220 Club, where the government gave the veterans from World War II $20 a week for 52 weeks so they can disengage from the travails in the military. What didn't you like about my mic?
The fact that we could hear you.
Or is it me? This man on my right would start trouble in an empty room. He would easily break up a high mass. So anyway, all these veterans taught me everything, because I didn't have a father when I was a kid. They taught me everything about everything. And I'd see them in the shower, and they never said anything, because I just saw them with clothes on. If I saw them in the shower, they'd have bullet holes all over their chests, or wounds, or stab wounds, or this or that. It was unbelievable, but they never said anything about it. And they taught me how to play pool, how to play cards, how to play basketball, how to do all these things. So I was like a pet to them, and I always loved veterans. And I loved the men who are here, even though I don't know you. All you have to do is I worship your service. So I had lived in different places. before I came here, of course, other than Taunton. And at that time, I was kind of lost. But I went out to Los Angeles, Beverly Hills, and I learned how to attend bar there. Before that, I was a school teacher. And then when I came to the Cape, I was a school teacher at New Bedford High School. I taught juniors. They were my favorite students because they weren't seniors. The seniors in the last months of school would be a pain in the ass. I thought they were special until maturity hit them. So anyway, I came back here. I had $3 in a 1940 Plymouth. And at the Rotary, there used to be cabins there. And you could rent them for $400 a season. The whole summer season, you could rent them. So I lived in one of those for a while. And I saw the sign New Seabury, so I drove up there to see if I could get a job tending bar. And they did. And I met Chris Byrne, who was from Rhode Island, from the Chase family, who knew everything and had everything. And of course, I was very Irish because I grew up that way, and I had that attitude. To me, they were very, very, very rich prots. And my people were from Limerick, and my father's people were from the Wicklow Mountains. Not friends of the Prots. So you have to learn how to assimilate in this country, and it's easy to do because all you have to do is shut your mouth and be a decent person and show some respect. So I never got arrested. I never did anything really bad. And I'm not saying I was the most virtuous person there ever was, but I was decent. That's all I cared about, was being a decent man, because my father was not. And I never met him till many, many years later. And then it was too late. So you can see how a young boy would be attracted to these men who were my heroes. I was born January the 19th, 1933, that blessed day that Prohibition was repealed. And that gave me an idea. So after a lot of travail in Beverly Hills, Detroit, different places where I was tending bar, because my cousin was in the FBI, he was arresting officer in the Lindbergh kidnapping. So he had a lot of nice ink about that. And his name was Boyd. That was a Boyd family. So when I got here, and I went up to New Seabury, and I got a job and met Chris Byrne and attended bar there. And then I had written over the summer, before I got here, I'd written a surrealistic novella. It was about an eight-hour journey through a bartender's mind in New York City during a full moon. And it was like mayhem. It was like a person behind the bar is a conductor of a symphony of an erratic, bizarre group of people trying to, don't talk to that one, talk to that one, kick that one out of here, get rid of that one. So in the bar business, the first thing is you have to establish order. You can't have a successful pub without having women. You have to have women. You have to have decent women. No hookers or things like that. animals in the bar. You have to clean out. As Huey Long said one time, and in order to make an omelet, you have to smash a few eggs. He smashed
That was his job.
dozens and dozens of eggs because you have to establish order. Because women are more social than men are. Men just say, hey, you going to the Red Sox game? Yeah, what time is it? I don't know, 2 o'clock. What time you want to meet? Right now? Okay, all right, that's it. That's the conversation. But women, oh, it's on and on and on. On and on and on and on. But it takes two to tango. So you have to make the place safe for women. And when I wrote this surrealistic novella, I was tenant bar at New Seabury Country Club. And Phil Rollins was a resident up there. And he had 8 terms. He was elected for 8 terms. And so he had some kind of power. And you need 3 elements to open a saloon. You need the loot, the license, and the location. And the license is the hardest thing to get in a town, because when you come into a town, the Board of Selectmen, they're very fussy. And in those days, there was only so many per population licenses issued. And it wasn't like it is now, where anybody could get a license. So you had to appear before the board. And I had never been arrested for a crime or anything like that. And Rollins says, do you need a partner? I said. And I don't know anything about business. I mean, I hate math, science, physics. 1 and 1 is 2. I don't care. But if you tell me 1 and 1 is 3, and it's metaphorical, and it creates a third thing, to me, the third thing is sacred. So I've always loved language. And that's what I taught, was juniors in high school, world literature. So that, and the Irish pubs are very literate. The bartender is like a man that does everything for people. He keeps, he holds bets in Ireland. He puts deeds in escrow. He helps the people read who can't read, to sign legal forms. And so he's more than just a bartender. So when you walk in a bar, you're not just selling drinks. It's a more, it's like a priest at a mass. And these people come up and they ask you questions about different things, and you usually have the answers and help them solve the problems, or help them read, or try to educate them. And that's the whole thing when you have that, is to set up that kind of a bar. Initially, it was just a bar, and I didn't want to serve food because food is a pain in the ass. And I didn't know how to cook or anything. I didn't care about it. I just cared about whiskey. Whiskey, whiskey. The poor man cried. They gave him water, and the poor man died. But you have to be careful, because you can't overserve. And then we went through a time in the 1980s where every lawyer and his brother was trying to pick your pockets. And so it was a constant struggle. So I joined and that time they had formed a group in the State House in Boston, and about the responsible beverage service. But I knew about that for a long time. So you have to be, it has to be orderly.
So Bobby, how did you end up in what was then the New Seabury Shopping Center? And what was there when you went there?
Not much. I remember going to the Rotary, and I had this car, I told you, a 40 Plymouth, $3. And all these things had a bit confluence, was like fatalistic. I had a cut down my chin from a dentist who fell over me in New York City. Nice guy, but I didn't want to sue him. But he was kind enough to do all the proper papers and so forth and so on. This is the most money I ever had in my life. It was about $4,300 or something like that. So then I met Rollins, and he says, well, I can get a license. So he did. So he was my silent partner, and he was good to me. He was a good man. And
And that's how it started.
what?
And that's how it started.
Yes,
What year was that?
1970, I think.
1973.
73.
July of 1973 is when Bobby opened his first pub.
Yeah, but I was drinking then, so I lost 3 years. I had about 42 detoxes. I got a graduate degree in booze from Taunton State Hospital. And I got another, my second year, I got a degree, a master's degree from
Well,
Dropkick Murphys.
when Bobby first opened, it was just the main room. And there was a barber shop
Yeah.
where the door is, the main door is now. That was a barber shop. And Bobby was trying to convince the barber to move somewhere else. And one night, there was a big brawl at like 2:30 in the morning, trying to get people out. And the brawl went through the wall into the barber shop. The barber came in the next morning and said, "That's it, you can have it." So
That was Steve. He was a nice guy.
So Bobby then expanded into that room, and then years later, the big dining room, which was then a field, right, Bobby? That was just a field.
It was
or a
an empty
horse-
field,
It was
yeah.
an empty field, he expanded there. But originally, there was Mary's Bank, which we'll come to, which is now the Chinese restaurant. There was the New Seabury Pharmacy, which was in the front corner. What's their name?
Corner.
Nicky Kikitis,
Nikki Kadidas.
slightly Greek.
Yeah. Across from that was the New Seabury House and Garden. Behind that was Hinckley's. There was Doc DiOrio's shop, office, and
The grocery store, Christie's Market.
Christie's was up front,
Right,
and later moved to the back,
right,
where Panera is now, that whole section.
right.
And there was the Mashpee Twin Cinemas, which is about where Elfstone is now,
Right.
approximately.
That was our first theater. That was our first. Would you like me to take over now?
Yeah, why don't you give Bobby a break, Mary?
I'll give Bobby a break.
Give me a break.
I'm going to give you a break, too. That's a hard act to follow.
Don't hurt my feelings. I'm a very sensitive man.
You know something? I can't
can't-
resist this. I just can't
I
resist
can't
this.
stand rejection.
My first
I cry
My
at
first
stoplights.
opinion of Bobby Byrne was I was a teller in the branch. The Barnstable County branch opened in 1966, and when it opened, we didn't get many customers. It was then called the New Seabury branch of Barnstable County. So everybody thought you had to live in New Seabury to bank there. So we didn't have, as I said, we didn't have a lot of business. I was very young, and honestly, I have to tell you, to the people in this room, that I owe my success in life to the beginners of this club. There were some wonderful people. Hank Small, he was Price Waterhouse. He's the president of Price Waterhouse. Hank Hall was the oil company. Lytton Steel. And J. Norman Fitzgerald had his own business. And it opened in 1966. In 1968, the Red Sox were winning the World Series. So my 20-year-old boss said, Mary, I'm going to that game. I'm not going to miss that game. And so he called the president of the bank, and the president of the bank said, well, if you do give your keys to LeClaire, she can manage it. We don't have any business out there anyway. So that's how I became one of the first women to manage a bank on Cape Cod. And that's in '68. And so anyway, after I was there a couple of months, I took all my strength and I went to see Mr. Ames and I said, Mr. Ames, we have to change the name of the bank. And he said, are you crazy? I thought he was going to fire me. I was so scared. And I said, no, sir, we have to change the name of the bank. If I want to get any business from the town, it's got to be called the Mashpee branch. And he said, do you know what that's going to cost? And I said, of course I do. I did my research on it. We have to go to the banking commissioner. We have to throw out all our literature. We have to, I had all my background and everything. And finally, he listened to me. So then I could go down to the town and say, I want an account from Mashpee. I want a Mashpee account. And she said, oh, I can't do that. I get travel pay to go to Falmouth. And I said, well, I'll just have to take it over your head and go to the selectmen because I said I'm going to get a Mashpee account. And so anyway, to get back to my 15 teachers, as I call them, Brad, you know most of them, they kind of took a liking on this young woman who had been in banking for 5 years, and I was trained in banking when I was younger, but had never managed a branch bank. And Hank Hall used to cut all the things out of the Wall Street Journal and bring them in and say, Mary, I think you should read this. And J. Norman Fitzgerald said, Mary, I'm going to teach you economic development. I didn't know what the words meant. I knew what economic, but I didn't know what he meant about. He said, we've got a place here that's in the center. It's between Route 6 and Route 28. We can attract business here. And years later, when I went in the county, I called J. Norman Fitzgerald and said, I want a county department called Economic Development. So, and they were all, you could only play so much golf. And so they'd come in the bank and we'd talk. And investments, they taught me investments. They had an investment group together. And they made me the treasurer. So I remember not too long ago, I ran into a man who said, you know something, you let me retire early. Because he said, you took me in your office and you said, you've got too much money in your savings account. You should put some in CDs. And he said, that was when it was 17%. Remember back then? Remember that?
Hey, Mary?
Yeah.
So
Oh,
let's go back a little bit here, because my research, and probably you and Bobby's memory will remember better, that, it was Malcolm Chase who started buying up all the land at Papaneset, New Seabury, where Mashpee Commons is now.
Mm-hmm.
And then he turned that over to two of his grandsons.
two of his grandsons.
Buff Chase, who developed Mashpee Commons and a lot of other places off Cape, and then Chris Burden, who took over New Seabury. And I think it was about that time, correct me if I'm wrong, that Buff Chase said, all right, let's turn this into Mashpee Commons and develop it. And you can see in some of those books that are going around, some of the original plans, you can see what
Yes.
it originally look like, but, you know, and Mary is great friends with Buff,
Oh, yes.
and
And Buff's father, Malcolm, was really, really good too. I mean, he would come in the bank and he always wore the same shirt or the same brown sweater, and he'd come in and he'd say, "Okay, Mary, how much did you do today? How'd you do today?" And talk to me and everything, and we talk about the development and everything, and like I said, that's where I got my education. That was and the people in this room, and if we only did that today, if we only had more of that today. But Chris, can we tell your story?
no, I want you first to just tell how you met Bobby, how that started.
Oh, when Bobby was coming in and he was buying money orders, and that bothered me. It always bothered me when I saw people spending money what they didn't have to. And I said to Bobby, you're buying these money orders and they cost so much a piece. I could set you up with a checking account and you could have your own records and everything. He looked at me and he said, "Don't you ever tell me what to do with my money." And that's how I met Bobby Byrne, the real Bobby Burns. But we became friends. From that time. But the bank became the community. I always had winter coats in the closet if somebody needed a coat. We did the Jaws of Life after we built the fire department. We did the Jaws of Life. In one day, we made $6,500 because we had everybody in the town. We had the clam chowder truck, and they did demonstration of what the Jaws of Life would do and all that kind of stuff and everything. And we had other people would have like selling tickets on something, but we did it in one day and that night we had a 50s dance on the rocks and the Shananas. Remember the Shananas used to play on the rocks, and we made $6,500 in one day. I've tried to find that article in the paper because it was in the paper about how we did that. But we had a Friends of the Library. We had Friends of the Library. We set up these little accounts, Friends of this. We didn't have a policeman who was a juvenile policeman, and we needed a juvenile policeman. So we sold candy bars in the bank, and then we took them back and sold them again. Because it cost $750 for a program for him to go someplace for a special school for juveniles. Because when I started in the bank in 1966, there was only one policeman in Mashpee. There was only one policeman in Mashpee. And everything came to the bank. It was just our little hub. And I remember one time I was taking a course at the college at night on banking, and there was a banker there, and I said to him, "I'm surprised that another bank hasn't come to Mashpee." And he said, "They won't move to Mashpee as long as you're there, because they know that they're not going to take business away from you."
Mary, can I jump in here a second?
Okay.
And Mary's talking about, that was community banking back then. And the other part of it was Bobby Burns Pub, because that was really the only place to go outside of nightclubs. So you'd go from one to the other, and you'd always find, and after every select board meeting, or back then selectmen's meeting,
Yeah.
they'd all be in the pub. And the real business got done after the meeting in the pub.
Right.
But we always used to joke. I'll tell my story real quick. I started at the Papanesset Inn when I was 14, bussing tables, washing dishes, and I'd go put my money in the account at Mary's Bank, because it was the only place to go.
Mary's Bank.
We were stuck with her. But we'd go in there, and I was putting the money in. I got to be 16 and a half, got my driver's license, went in and said to Mary, I'm gonna buy a truck, I need my money, close my account. I'm not closing your account. I'm like, I want my money. I'm not giving it to you. And I'm like, arguing with her. She goes, I'm gonna give you what's called a passbook loan. You keep your money in your account as collateral, and you pay back the loan as you go. That way, you build up credit. And, you know, that was the type of thing Mary did. Mary would come into Bobby Burns every once in a while, more than every once in a while, and say, all right, I'll give you for, you know, collecting money for something. And you had no choice. And if she didn't get enough the first time she passed the hat, it went around again. And there was a guy named Tony Moniz, who was a homeless person that lived in Mashpee. When he died, he was penniless. Well, guess who buried Tony financially? Everybody in Bobby Burns, because we passed the hat, and then Bobby dipped in and matched whatever was there, and Tony got buried. And he had a very nice funeral.
He did. He did. He had 2 eulogies, and he was one of the first people to be buried in the cemetery, in the veteran cemetery, because he was a veteran. He was a veteran.
But that was the type of what went on back then.
It was almost like family. It was almost like that. And the people from like New Seabury and the people who retired, they all took part in the town. They would served on the boards. They got on the different boards. You remember that, and they helped other people who couldn't do some things like that. And we learned an awful lot. That's how we did it. We taught each other. We taught each other. When we had the Indians sued, when the Indians sued to get their land back, oh, that was a hard time. It was a very difficult time. And the first morning, 2 men came in and they started to argue, and I said, no, this bank is going to be neutral. There will be nothing in this bank about them. But I worked with Senator Brooke. Oh, he was so good. He bought money down. He bought SBA loans down. And we sat him, at that time, at my home, we sat down and said, who can we help? And we went through the customers of my bank, because builders, that day, they stopped getting their money. They stopped getting their money that day. I didn't know anything about writing mortgages when I started out, but I had 2 people who lived in New Seabury, Mr. Clark, and they had their own company. They helped me write my first mortgage. They taught me how you get a third now, you get a third during when you're making it, and you get the last third, and that's how it works. And so I became versed in banking. So, but I loved every single minute I worked there.
So, Bobby, as the Commons grew, so did your pub in size.
Yeah, it was expanded 8 or 9 times, because New Seabury had a maintenance shop there, and I took parts of that over so I could put in the refrigeration. When I had to go to a kitchen, I didn't want to sell food, but I saw the wisdom of it later on, because you have to have women in the bar. You have to have nice women and families, and establish it in that way, because that keeps order. And you have to be very, very friendly and clean with the police. Mashpee police have always been fantastic to me. They've always been kind and nice, and if I ever needed help or something in the early days, and people in there were people in there that shouldn't have been in there. Of course, I had Mikey Pendergast, who was a monster bartender, who would laugh as he beat somebody up. He was funny as hell. And then this one here, my main thumper. Because you have to do that. Must be cruel to be kind. You don't mind smashing somebody up a little bit. So, Rollins called me one day. He said, Bobby, you got to call these guys off. He says, you know what mayhem is? I said, yeah, it's injuring a person permanently. So he said, you got to call these animals off. So later on, I didn't have to do that. Once you establish order, because when you open a saloon in a new town, who's going to come in there? Every asshole in the world that's been kicked out of every other place. So this is the last thing they do. So you have to get rid of them. As I said before, and what Huey Long said, you have to smash it. To make an omelet, you have to smash a few eggs. And then you can have a nice omelet.
Bobby, what you taught us early on was to make the place interesting to everybody, you have to be able to have a mixture. You have to have two Republicans sitting next to two Democrats, sitting next to two gays, sitting next to two lesbians, sitting next to two straights. And it was the clamshell theories where everybody's in their own little clamshell world, but respecting each other's world. And it's what made it interesting is that you had such a cross-section of people. And Bobby's theory back then was, we're gonna be, because, like I said, we had a 2 o'clock liquor license. It became the Wild West in the evening sometimes. And he would just say, you know, we are going to, as he's just said, establish order, and this is the type of place we're going to be. And he hired, back then he referred to us as aircraft carriers to keep the peace. And he was always, he would tell us, don't worry about any legal ramifications. Phil Rollins, the DA, was a partner of that.
Thank God for Phil Rollins.
Yes, sir.
Bobby, can you talk about your influence on poetry? And did you used to go in your restaurant and sit down and talk, read poetry to your customers?
I didn't hear you.
May I?
Yeah.
I'm going to paraphrase, but basically, he's asking about your poetry, and would you recite poetry to customers as they came in?
Yeah. That's part of, I modeled it on Irish bartenders. They were usually pretty literate, and they performed, there was a lot of poetry in the place, so I predicated it on language because I like languages. And I have the Great Wall of language in there. There's not only, I think, 15 languages, but there's 15 translations in between the lines. And so there's, you want two of everything. I had Russian, and then I had Hebrew, because I always had a real affection for the Jewish culture, because it was orderly. And then I liked other languages, French and so forth. So then I made that the theme, because I wanted to make it a literate-looking place as a kind of on its way to a kind of museum. So I had all these quotes from all over the world, and the translations also. And that was my thing. I always loved books. I always liked the story where the two old maid aunts have a nephew, and they say, what are we going to give him for his birthday? And the other one says, well, we could give him a book. And the other one says, can't do that. He's already got a book. as if you could have enough of them. The only books I would burn would be mathematics. 1 and 1 is 2, I don't care. It does nothing for me. Or physics or science or this or that. And now I've got to the point, I shouldn't have done that because I have no technological knowledge, and so my iPhone is a nightmare. So it's, if you eschew a skill you're gonna, but you don't know what the future is. When I was a kid, you had a pencil and a piece of paper, and that was the end of the technology. Ticonderoga lead. So,
I think what we'll do now is open it up to questions, and there's a lot of you that have a lot of history here. Maybe you want to relate some stories or ask questions. Mary's a real historian, that type of thing. I see Russ has got his hand up in the back.
I guess first of all, I have to give you both credit for being who you are and what you've done, and how you present yourself very, very well. The question I have is, since you've been around 2 or 3 years, and you've been in Mashpee 2 or 3 years, what do you think has been the most important change in the town? This is for either one of you or both of you.
Did you hear that, Bob?
well, I would have to say that you have to have some kind of a higher power. You have to be a moral person. You don't have to be perfect, but you can be decent. I would ask everybody to be a decent person, so. Not to be grandiose, so prideful, or say, do you know who I am? I don't want to sound like John Kerry. You might also learn that I'm ultra right-wing neo-fascist.
So, Bobby, the question was, what's the biggest change you've seen in the town in your 50-plus years?
Decency. People are pretty good to each other. We had a grip on the criminals and with Rollins and those kind of things. So you have to have order, and you have to like as many people as you can to show some kind of virtue.
How about you, Mary?
Well, I've seen a lot of things. I've seen the little library grow into the big library, and I appreciated what somebody said about that. As we grew and we changed, I mean, right now, if we had done what some of the people wanted to do in Mashpee 10 years ago, we wouldn't have a housing crisis right now. It's the conflict of, I could give a political speech right now, and I'm not going to, but it's working together. I think maybe giving you an example would be when I lost faith in the bank that I could do anything. It was when the Boston Bank came down and bought us. And the first thing that we argued with was, you don't give loans on Cape Cod in the fall. You give loans on the Cape Cod in the spring when they're starting their businesses and they're getting ready for the business and everything. In the fall, the people don't have the money to pay it back. That isn't the way the Cape works. And I used to have an old bank president who said, if anybody knew how many times a dollar bill crosses the Cape in the wintertime, you'd be amazed. But that's what it did. And so I didn't get along with the Merchants Bank when they came down and bought us. And they wanted it done the way they do it in Boston. Well, this isn't Boston, this is Cape Cod, and you do things different on Cape Cod. You take, you know, now we have so many organizations doing so many things. I mean, just an example is, right now, we're working on what happens if the SNAP money goes. We've got 40% of our kids in Mashpee on SNAP. Who's gonna feed them? What are we gonna do? We work together in Mashpee. I think that's the biggest change I've seen, is that we've lost some of that. We've lost some of that humanity. And I really think we need to get it back. I really do. But I did want to tell you one, I think this is interesting. One of the things that I did when I was in the bank was, I love art. Artists. And so one of my customers was Ralph Cahoon. And this is what Ralph Cahoon thought of me. He painted that picture. One day, one of my tellers came in and said, Ralph Cahoon came in, and I said, yes, and I didn't see him. I didn't wait on him. She said he left a paper bag on your desk, and he had painted this. Because if we had new painters, and I used to say, put your paintings up on the wall. If they sell, they sell. If they don't, they don't. But please, you remember that?
Hold it up one more time.
Sure, certainly.
Very nice. Got it.
Yeah. He had a wonderful sense of humor.
Are you on the left or the right?
I'm the one in the middle. I'd rather be the mermaid. But I couldn't resist bringing this to you and showing you. Because as I said, I owe everything I have to the people in this room.
Any other questions, comments,
I have a comment.
stories?
A comment for Bobby Byrne. My wife died 3 years ago, but in January, before she passed that April in '22, we had a magical luncheon with some of our friends that came up from New York City. And it was the last great luncheon we had. We knew she was dying. And then to celebrate after her funeral, we were in Bobby Byrne's up in Sandwich. And again, it was 40 people out on the deck there, and it was just a magical time. So I have the fondest memories of Bobby Byrne's.
Yeah, that's wonderful. My granddaughter, when I said that we were going to be together, Bobby, she said, well, you got to tell him that every time we come home from Denver, that's the first place we have to go. And you've been there, I've been there, my daughter's been there, and my great-grandson is there. So you have served 4 generations, and to many of the people in this room, you've served more than 1 generation.
Thank you.
Mary, a question would be, you mentioned Buff Chase, and then you mentioned his cousin, Chris Byrne.
Chris Burden.
What are the impact of the Chase family, because of what Malcolm Chase bought in the 1920s, has been the impact of the town of Mashpee?
Again, I'm going to say, if Buff was allowed to do what we put on paper, because Mashpee Commons has won so many awards in other places, and I'm sorry, but there's just a few people in this town that decided they were going to stop him, and they did. And they cost him millions of dollars, because people on the boards of this town, what could have been.
And Mary and Bobby both now live in the Commons,
Yes,
so they've worked and lived there for
I
50
love
plus
living
years.
there. I love living there.
After we threw Mary out of our neighborhood.
True.
And Bobby is 92, and I'm 91.
Mary lies.
Had a lot of work done.
Another question. Did the building of Christ the King Church have any effect on Mashpee Commons?
Yes,
Did your bank loan the money to build that church?
No, Father Tosti raised all the money to build that church. Father Tosti raised all the money to build that church. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Yes, I am a history buff. I love them. And I've worked very hard with the Indian families here too. Right. And,
Who remembers where the church was before?
yeah. Yeah. Show this museum.
And before that?
Get you
No, the Papaneset,
marketplace.
no, the Papaneset Community Center. And then I think you're talking about Marston's Mills or Katuitt was the St. Jude's Chapel, which they then moved, and it now abuts Christ the King.
Yeah, Buff did a beautiful job in Rhode Island too, when he was it Providence?
Yes.
Yes, Providence, downtown Providence. There's a video where he was given an award because, and his story is that he was walking down the street and he was telling his two daughters that all these buildings over here are going to go for auction next week, and he said, "I wonder what's going to happen to them," and he said, "They're all old buildings." And his daughter Lily said, "Well, Daddy, why don't you do something about it?" And he did. He rebuilt that, and he's had some real honors for what he's built in Rhode Island. Yeah.
Yeah,
I worked with 4 generations of, I worked with Malcolm, I worked with Malcolm's father, I worked with Malcolm, I worked with Buff, and now I work with Sarah. And they're, every single one of them, the main thing they've wanted was to make this place a beautiful place.
The other thing that people perhaps don't realize, Mary, you could probably tell the story about the name Berkshire Hathaway. Most people know the name Berkshire Hathaway. If it wasn't for Berkshire Hathaway, okay, all
You
this
tell a
wouldn't have
story.
happened.
You
The
tell.
Chase family owned Berkshire Hathaway. They sold a little piece of Berkshire Hathaway to a guy named Warren Buffett, okay? And they retained the stock from the Berkshire Hathaway transaction. And so they rode the good work of that, okay? And that money from the old mills in Fall River and the rest of the places there were the impetus, were the cash that allowed them to do
Whatever,
okay?
yeah.
So there's an interconnection between Berkshire Hathaway, the Chase family into Mashpee Commons, and New Seabury, and a lot of these other things.
If I could change anything on Mashpee, is it okay if I say this?
Go for it.
Okay, if I could change anything about Mashpee, I would change the fact that we let 200 to 300 people decide where we're going to spend our money, and we don't go to town meetings. And those people make the decisions, so you can't complain afterwards that you don't like what happens. And when we have an election, and we have 17,000 people, and we get 2,000 people at an election. So if I was ever going to work for anything, and I do work for it all the time, is if you love your community, work in it. You know, work in and be a part of it.
We're running out of time here.
Yes.
Bobby,
Yes.
any last words of wisdom?
Yes.
That's what I thought. Okay, you're done.
There's a play by John Patrick called The Tea House of the August Moon. And in it takes place in Okinawa, and there's a Okinawan guy who was kind of a philosopher, Sakini. And he says a great thing I always remembered. Pain make man think. Thought make man wise. Wisdom make life endurable. Blessings.
Bobby, this gentleman right here.
From that, one of my favorite lines in that show is what Mary is suggesting. When a new kid comes, a new lieutenant is going to be sent off to this town which has been misbehaving. And the colonel looks at him and he says, we're going to teach these natives the meaning of democracy if we have to shoot every one of them.
Mary, any last words?
Just what I just said about, please get involved. Please get involved.
Yes, sir.
Actually, a question for Bobby. People who start bars and restaurants often fail because they're overly fond with the drink. And you've said you're not much for math and you had a relationship with alcohol. What turned it all around for you?
I'd like to hear this.
Well, I'd had so many detoxes. You know, I had degrees in it. I got my bachelor's degree at Taunton State Hospital. I got my other degrees. I have a PhD from Dropkick Murphys. So anyway, I learned a lot about not drinking. I know I was kind of doomed because my father was an alcoholic, and his family were all alcoholics, and after all, they were Irish, so. But I suppose I learned virtue not from churches, but I learned ethics and those kind of things from the camaraderie of other men who could share their experience. It's like veterans all sitting together and talking about certain things. They only made them comedic. They laughed about some of their situations.
I'm going to just jump in for a second, Robert. You know, when Bobby was opening that place, he took a lot of us local folks, young and old, and gave us an experience. And we weren't just pouring drinks, and I think you've heard him describe. He was teaching us all he had learned about tending bar and reacting with people and how to run a place. He took care of us, and we took care of Bobby. And it developed from there. And, you know, a lot of us are still consider each other family. We get together and stuff like that. But he built a camaraderie that fueled the success. And at one time, you had 5 places, I think, Bobby.
I think I had 7.
You had how many?
7.
About 7.
Okay, 7, I stand corrected. But we all went on to different things at different times. But, you know, Bobby brought that culture, and it was the culture that changed and made him successful.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, folks.